Welcome to NTD Good Morning.
Here are today's top stories. A rapidly strengthening storm is forming in the eastern U.S. today, with forecasters saying this third round of storms is bringing snow, rain, and wind.
The White House says the military did conduct a follow-up strike on a suspected drug boat, and it's defending the decision.
The man accused of shooting a United Healthcare CEO sat in court not wearing a prison uniform as his attorneys battled to get key evidence tossed.
The White House vowing to continue its mass deportation operation after the deadly shooting of 2 National Guard members, pausing all asylum and immigration from what it calls third world countries.
Education in the spotlight. Lawmakers will debate several bills today meant to stop foreign influence in education.
And domestic air travel could become more expensive if you don't have a real ID, as the TSA announces new fees for air travelers.
This is NTD Good Morning, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here are Stephanie Cox and Carrie Dunst.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Today's Tuesday, December 2nd. You're watching NTD Good Morning. In today's top news, forecasters say a bomb cyclone is forming over the eastern U.S. today. That means a rapidly strengthening storm that quickly drops in temperature.
Yeah, this comes on the heels of 2 other very recent winter storms. Here's what's happening with the weather.
Tuesday is the day that the Northeast is going to see the majority of the snow from this winter storm.
The third winter storm of this week is sweeping across the country. The record-setting doozy is hitting the eastern U.S. today. It's bringing northern snow, southern rain, and a chance for Gulf Coast tornadoes.
It is going to be a wet, sloppy mess with rain heavy at times throughout parts of the southeast.
Farther west, people are digging out after previous rounds of snow and ice. The FAA says some airports could see ground stops today after one at Chicago O'Hare last night.
You know, you are in Chicago, you got to be ready for any storm.
Officials say a child was taken to the hospital with minor injuries after this school bus crash in northern Illinois yesterday. This video from Topeka, Kansas shows school bus drivers stopping on the side of a slippery highway. Nearby Kansas City has a new daily snowfall record from yesterday. And in Minneapolis, a man is using the recent weather to build an ice castle.
There's lights in the castle, there's all sorts of caverns, there's ice slides. There's going to be a little bar.
In addition to the snow and rain, forecasters predict new low temperature records in some parts of the country today.
The weather pattern that we're in keeps it cold for most of the week, for most of the country.
And staying on the weather, the National Weather Service says the rain in Mobile, Alabama yesterday set a new daily record, and nearly 72 million people are under the winter weather alerts, going from the Rockies all the way to southern New England.
Next, the White House is defending a controversial second military strike on a suspected drug smuggling boat in the Caribbean.
The strike killed survivors of an initial attack and has triggered bipartisan scrutiny in Congress.
The White House yesterday confirmed that U.S. forces conducted a second strike on a drug boat in the Caribbean Sea on September 2nd, something the administration initially denied. According to the White House, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth authorized the mission, but Navy Vice Admiral Frank Bradley, then commander of Joint Special Operations Command, ordered and directed the second strike himself. White House spokeswoman Karoline Leavitt told reporters the admiral was within his legal right to do so.
Admiral Bradley worked well within his authority and the law, directing the engagement to ensure the boat was destroyed and the threat to the United States of America was eliminated.
The Washington Post first reported that U.S. forces observed survivors clinging to the wreckage before ordering the second strike. That reporting raised questions about whether the operation may constitute a war crime. Pressed about the legality of a second strike that targeted survivors, the White House said the operation was lawful and conducted in self-defense.
What law is it that allows no survivors?
The strike conducted on September 2nd was conducted in self-defense to protect Americans in vital United States interests. The strike was conducted in international waters and in accordance with the law of armed conflict.
But Leavitt did not say whether the second strike was ordered specifically because survivors remained in the water, and she said Hegseth did not order Admiral Bradley to leave no survivors.
I saw that quoted in a Washington Post story. I would reject that the Secretary of War ever said that. However, the president has made it quite clear that if narco-terrorists, again, are trafficking illegal drugs towards the United States, he has the authority to kill them.
Chief Pentagon spokesman Sean Parnell also pushed back against media reports that said Hegseth ordered all survivors to be killed. On social media, Hegseth defended Bradley as an American hero, saying he stands by his combat decisions. It's one of at least 19 U.S. strikes targeting alleged narco-trafficking vessels in the Caribbean and off the Pacific coast of Latin America since September. The administration says those strikes have killed at least 76 people, but lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are demanding to know more. Democratic and Republican lawmakers overseeing the military said they are investigating the September 2nd strike. House Armed Services Committee Chairman Mike Rogers has said, "We take seriously the reports of follow-on strikes and are taking bipartisan action to gather a full accounting of the operation in question." Bradley will provide a classified briefing to lawmakers on Thursday.
And joining us to discuss the latest in U.S.-Venezuela tensions and the September 2nd attack on that boat in the Caribbean is Brent Sadler, Research Fellow for Naval Warfare and at the Heritage Foundation and a former Navy officer himself. Good to have you with us this morning, Brent.
Good morning, and great to be back.
Good morning. So let's start with this question of the legality of that second strike on that boat. How do you see it in terms of naval warfare?
Well, I mean, it's important to note that we don't have all the facts. That hopefully will come out, maybe perhaps in a closed classified briefing. So we still may not have it publicly, but hopefully in that congressional hearing, there'll be more of the facts to this specific case as to what happened and whether or not it was within the bounds of legality and certainly customary law at the same time. So in this particular case, what's being said is a secondary strike was ordered specifically to kill the surviving members. It could be just as likely that a secondary strike, and this is, I think, what the White House was signaling at yesterday's press conference, to take out the vessel itself as it was still floating or it was still potentially able to carry the narcotics forward and not specifically targeting any individuals. Again, the target so far of all these attacks is not the individuals necessarily, but the boat on which the drugs are being carried and the drugs themselves.
And does it matter? I mean, the Trump administration has said its operations in the Caribbean are a non-international armed conflict with the alleged drug traffickers, and the definition of the conflict itself can determine some of the laws that apply in terms of international law. We've got the administration saying it's acting in self-defense by destroying the boats. Some other reports are saying the survivors may have been subject to protections provided to shipwrecked sailors or to those given to troops who have been rendered unable to continue fighting. That's according to the BBC. How important is that designation of how we define this conflict at all?
Well, we should be careful. I mean, it is a very simple proposition that we have in front of us right now, defending American lives and interests, and doing it in a way in which is moral. That's at the bottom line. That's what these laws are trying to do. But trying to parse in and try to figure out by which legalese definition, we can get lost inside a legal fiction, which gets us further away from the realities before us. A international state-sponsored narcotics cartel that does have armed gangs that are operating as an extension of this nation state, Venezuela in this case, on American streets that are killing Americans, either through their product, which is lethal, like cocaine, fentanyl, and marijuana that oftentimes is laced with fentanyl, and through political intimidation of local police and judges that's happening right now. And that's a national security threat. It is resulting in tens of thousands of American deaths every year. And so it is clearly a national security threat. And I think the United States is taking, appropriate actions to do that. We'll see in this particular case if it meets the standards that we expect of our military, or if any laws were violated. But it's too early to start to say that that's the case.
And just taking a look now at some of the responses from lawmakers demanding a full accounting. We've got Bradley set to give a briefing to Congress on Thursday. Do you see this part of the process as healthy checks and balances, or is there anything else to it? Are you satisfied with the process as it's playing out so far?
Well, I mean, Congress members should be careful about the words and the accusations they throw without any insight or facts to back up their statements, because all that does is it inflames and incites a political or a public dispute that's unnecessary when service members are putting their lives at risk to try to protect American lives and interests here at home at the same time. So I would say I was disappointed with a lot of the rhetoric, but very unfortunately a reality here in Washington, D.C. these days. But it is appropriate for members of Congress to demand that the executive branch provide a briefing that explains themselves in this case. But we should be careful. If this was done for political reasons, and again, we have an anonymous whistleblower, that individual should be able to come forward with all the protections to lay out what they heard, what they saw. But if we have a potential of having one anonymous after another anonymous source, and every time the generals and the admirals are called up to Congress, it starts to become a circus. And so we should be very careful and judicious about how we actually go forward. And again, I think providing full protections to the whistleblower and making their testimony public is what's called for to prevent frivolous or politically motivated accusations in the future, which are more intended more to distract than to actually ensure accountability.
Now, as you mentioned, many American lives are lost to drug overdose and poisoning of various kinds due to all of the drugs that are being smuggled into the U.S. This strike is one of a number of strikes similar to what we're examining right now in the region, trying to target that issue. What's the broader impact on Maduro and geopolitics in the region as you see it?
Well, again, the national interest here for the United States is the destruction of the narco-drug cartels and all of the evils that they propagate here on American streets today, not just the drugs, but again, the violence that they are also responsible for in the United States. More should be discussed and talked about that. But when it comes to the regime, the Maduro regime, they are able to exercise political control of Venezuela, a country, because of the muscle and the money that these cartels have. So it's really it's a deal in blood, a very sinister deal between Maduro and his regime and the cartels in order for them to continue to profit and to continue to expand their business with the protections and all of the official sanctions that a nation state has. And that is, I think, at jeopardy, because when the cartels start to lose their money, they lose their power. They lose their power. They're not able to prop up the Maduro regime that keeps the people in check, and the whole house of cards falls down. At least that's, I think, what they fear in Caracas right now.
And as we know, Trump has warned that U.S. efforts to halt Venezuelan drug trafficking by land would begin very soon. So we'll be watching this very closely to see the next steps and how they may pan out. Thank you so much for your insights this morning. Brent Sadler, good to speak with you.
Thank you very much.
And as you guys both discussed, the House and the Senate, they're going to start their inquiries into the reported second strike on the drug boat in the Caribbean. We'll be keeping you updated on that. And the White House says the Trump administration is very optimistic about the developing peace process between Russia and Ukraine. U.S. officials are holding talks in both the U.S. and in Russia. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar brings us more.
They had very good talks with the Ukrainians in Florida, and now, of course, Special Envoy Witkoff is on his way to Russia. This is sort of the shuttle diplomacy that you've seen from this administration play out, where we speak equally with both sides. We put points on
White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt praising the Trump administration's efforts in trying to end the fighting between Russia and Ukraine. She pointed to the fact that Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is traveling to Russia just one day after Secretary of State Marco Rubio met with Ukrainian representatives in Florida. After Rubio's meeting on Sunday, President Trump said that Ukraine still has domestic issues, pointing to ongoing corruption investigations.
Ukraine's got some difficult little problems. They have some difficult problems.
You just said that Ukraine has a little bit of problems.
Well, we have a corruption situation going on, which is not helpful.
But Trump stopped short of saying that Ukraine's corruption investigations are slowing down the peace process. Now on Monday, the White House was asked about Trump's comments, mentioning a statement by the previous administration which said there was no proof of widespread corruption in Ukraine.
corruption is never helpful, and he does not want to see American tax dollars taken advantage of, which is why he has stopped the endless checks that were being written by the previous administration to fund this war.
She added that the US has changed its strategy in its support for Ukraine. Instead of donating weapons directly to Kiev, Washington now sells them to NATO, which then sends them to Ukraine. Also on Monday, Russia confirming that President Vladimir Putin is set to meet with Witkoff, but a spokesman for the Kremlin suggesting that the talks on Tuesday will be held behind closed doors.
For the success of the process, we are not going to hold talks in the megaphone regime. We are not going to hold any discussions via media.
The spokesman declined to specify the issues Putin and Witkoff are set to discuss. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
And thanks to Arian for that report. We now move to Israel. President Trump is urging Israel to maintain diplomacy with Syria. Comes after an Israeli military operation near the border heightened tensions. In a Truth Social post yesterday, Trump praised Syria's interim president Ahmad al-Sharaa, and he warned Israel that more military action could jeopardize Syria's fragile new government. Trump has backed al-Sharaa as a potential stabilizing leader, meeting him at the White House in November and lifting terrorism-related sanctions. Israel and Syria have held several U.S.-brokered talks on border security, though progress has now stalled. Tensions rose again on November 28th when 6 Israeli soldiers were wounded near the Syrian village near the buffer zone that separates the two countries. Israel says it was responding to aggression from the terrorist group Jama Islamiyah, while Syria accuses Israel of committing a war crime. Both governments have yet to respond to Trump's latest call for dialogue. This as Trump has reportedly invited Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu back to the White House during a call yesterday as they discussed efforts to dismantle the Hamas terror group. And joining us now to discuss from Tel Aviv is David Wormser. He's an analyst for Middle East Affairs with the Center for Security Policy. Thank you for joining us, David. Clearly, relations are very fragile between Israel and Syria. Trump backing and hopeful for this new key regional party and a former U.S. designated terrorist turned now Syrian President Ahmad al-Sharaa. Syria historically a hostile neighbor. Can al-Sharaa, with Trump's backing and the incentives that he's offering, usher in a new page between Israel and Syria, or do you see tensions to continue since it's, a tale as old as time?
Well, no, excellent question. I think that there's a really ambiguous and complex dance going on between Israel and Syria. It is, of course, considerably conflictual, as we saw in the last few days with the attack in Bet Jin that resulted in 6 Israeli soldiers being wounded and several of terrorists who also, by the way, were dressed as regime soldiers were either killed or captured. So there's that complexity. On the other side, there's been this ongoing negotiation between the Syrians and the Israelis behind the scenes to try to come up with both stabilization, but also potentially even a pathway to peace. Though the terms and the intersection of those, the demands are still relatively far apart, and I'm not sure they can be bridged, but nevertheless, there is a dialogue. And then you have the larger framework of the Israeli-Turkish tensions. And Syria, of course, is caught in the middle. So there's all these various layers to this relationship that make it both conflictual, but also there's a lot of dancing going on and even negotiations.
Can you zoom in a little bit, David, into Syria, the different ethnicities, the potential emergence of a new leader who historically was designated by the U.S. as a terrorist, and any ingratiating toward Israel is typically viewed by the Muslim world as weakness. So how does al-Sharaa balance the nuances of moving Syria forward?
Yeah, another excellent question. Well, al-Sharaa, of course, he has tried to reach out to some extent to Israel, but there's a whole government surrounding him that still includes a lot of elements that are openly and vociferously pro-terrorist. I mean, essentially still al-Qaeda in their orientation or ISIS in their orientation. And so al-Sharaa, first of all, the question is he genuine? And second of all, can he survive if he's genuine? And that's something that concerns the Israelis, but it even more concerns the minorities in Syria, all of which are really at the front line. They feel this the most, and they face, if they get it wrong, they face extermination, physical extermination. And that would be the Druze, which are several hundred, actually a few million in Syria, the Alawites, which may be between 4 and 7 million in Syria, the Kurds are in the northeast, and there's also a lot of Christians that are terrified of this new regime. And they all make that very clear that they're very scared because the regime contains many elements that not only say they will, but demonstrate and mobilize and create a frenzy on the streets to attack these minorities. And so it's a very tense situation there, and the government is very unstable. I would add one more thing to that, which is there's a grave concern about the overthrow of Ashara because he is fairly isolated among his own people who are much more radical than the face that he is showing. Again, whether he's genuine or not, that's a question, but certainly the face he's showing is more moderate, and that's not finding favor with a lot of his people as well.
In terms of the dynamics, could Turkey, with Trump's pressure, carrots and sticks, potentially help stabilize al-Shara, or does that undermine his legitimacy within those various factions that you were just describing?
I think he wants Erdogan wants Ashara somewhat weak because the weaker he is, the more dependent he is on Turkey. Turkey's not terrified, but they have very expansive ambitions in Syria, and they believe they control this regime in Syria, the Ashara regime. Yet Ashara is trying to play the Saudis off. He's trying to maintain sort of a more independent path by reaching out to the Saudis and others. And that, of course, worries the Turks a lot. So the greater the instability that Ashara faces, the more he still has to rely on the Turks. So the Turks are actually, at this point, sad to say, and I realize the administration doesn't see it this way, but the Turks seem to be a destabilizing factor. And their strategic interests, as they define it, lead them to that point. So I'm not sure there's a carrot and stick approach that will work effectively to make the Turks really pull back and allow for what the Israelis are seeking, which is actually somewhat aligned with the Syrian government, which is to create a red line structure between Turkey and Israel in Syria that allows the Syrian government to proceed relatively peacefully in between those two powers that squeeze them.
And David, as we finish up, could you give an update on the situation with Hamas? Because success in any part of the Middle East creates, I would think, progress. Whereas if Hamas were to fall, or were to flare up again, that could then cause a ripple over in Syria, via Turkey, etc.
Yeah, another excellent question. Both Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in Lebanon are unresolved issues, and the diplomatic route in both is reaching a crisis point. The Israelis realize that in Gaza right now, there's really not. I think the United States and Israel have sort of come to an agreement that you divide Gaza between the Gaza that's already under Israeli control and the rest you sort of pressure and isolate. But I'm not sure that's possible. So I think the Israelis sometime in the next 2 months or so will be forced to go in and finish it. And then you can see a real progress towards something else in Gaza. Lebanon, we're seeing the same thing. The Lebanese government is proving incapable of really restraining Hezbollah, and it bends back to Syria, that Hezbollah is getting weapons now again through the Syrian structures, which the Syrian government, until about 3-4 weeks ago, was very adamantly stopping all those shipments and was greatly opposed to Hezbollah. Now all of a sudden you're seeing that reverse, and Hezbollah's rearming, and the Lebanese government is just not able to disarm them. And so again, the Israelis are feeling heavy pressure to finish the war essentially by force rather than use the diplomatic route. I think in that too, the United States sees it relatively the same way.
So complex. We thought there was a lot of progress happening, but step by step. Appreciate your analysis this morning, David Wormser. Good to see you.
Sure. Thank you.
Always a complex region, but even though the Iranian regime was weakened and they were a big supporter of Hamas, Hamas does have support traditionally from many other countries in the region, so we'll have to see how a peaceful Gaza comes about. Coming up, Education in the spotlight. Lawmakers will debate several bills today meant to stop foreign influence in education.
And the man accused of shooting a United Healthcare CEO sat in court yesterday not wearing a prison uniform as his attorneys battled to get key evidence tossed out. We're going to have that and more. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. Luigi Mangione, the man accused of killing the United Healthcare CEO last December, appeared in court yesterday.
His attorneys requested the hearing in an effort to get key evidence removed from the case, and NTD's Arlene Richards brings us more.
Luigi Mangione, 27, entered a state court in Manhattan on Monday wearing a gray suit and button-down shirt rather than a prison uniform. Court officers removed his handcuffs to allow him to take notes. He's the man accused of shooting a United Healthcare CEO last December. His attorneys were attempting to get key evidence excluded from the case, arguing that they were seized unlawfully. Police had taken items from Mangione's backpack during the arrest. Items found include a notebook, a silencer, and a 3D printed handgun that prosecutors say connect Mangione to the killing. The notebook contains writings that the district attorney's office has said show how Mangione allegedly plotted the attack. For example, prosecutor filings state the notebook says, quote, "The target is insurance. It checks every box." Mangione's attorneys argue the items were obtained without a search warrant and therefore they should be excluded from trial. During the hearing on Monday, prosecutors began calling witnesses involved in the search and subsequent arrest of Mangione. A sergeant at the New York Public Information Office testified that he dispersed information to several media outlets and social media as requested by investigators who wanted help from the public in locating the potential shooter. The prosecution showed video clips of the shooting as well as several photographs that depict a man who may be Mangione. Other witnesses testified about downloading surveillance video from the Altoona, Pennsylvania McDonald's where Mangione was arrested. The witness turned over the footage to police after Mangione's arrest. Meanwhile, an emergency services coordinator testified about a dispatch call from Altoona police to check an ID provided by Mangione, which later was determined to be fake. Other witnesses were called in the afternoon, including a Pennsylvania corrections officer who was assigned to monitor Mangione. Some protesters were outside the courthouse with signs calling for Mangione's release. Other supporters watched from the back of the courtroom. Mangione faces state and federal charges. The state charges carry the possibility of life in prison. Federal prosecutors are seeking the death penalty. Neither trial has been scheduled yet. The evidence hearing in the state case is expected to continue for the next few days, while the next hearing date in the federal case is January 9th. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
And a focus on education. For lawmakers today, they'll debate several bills meant to stop foreign influence in education. NTD's Melina Weisskopf joins us live with more. Good morning, Melina. Good to see you this morning. Tell us more about this effort to protect young minds.
Hi, good morning, Steph. So there are several bills that will be debated and possibly voted on as early as today. They address pretty much the same issue, but essentially lawmakers are trying to leave no stone unturned. Collectively, the bills make it illegal for K-12 schools to accept funds or enter into contracts with the Chinese Communist Party or other foreign adversaries. The schools will actually lose federal funding if they do keep this foreign financial support. There's also an effort to empower parents to police schools on the issue to try to have more transparency on the matter. Under these bills, parents can actually request detailed information from schools about foreign influence in their child's education and whether certain teachers have gotten paid by foreign adversaries. Now, lawmakers say, of course, the main issue is coming from the Chinese Communist Party. The chairman says one of the biggest concerns that he has is the possibility of the Chinese Communist Party weakening the U.S. military from within through indoctrination. Listen to what he said yesterday.
A recent report by Defending Education found that many Confucius classrooms are located near U.S. military bases, which indicate the CCP may be targeting military children for indoctrination. It requires teachers to sign contracts pledging not to, and I quote, damage the national interest of China, end quote.
Now, the regime notes that the regime offers free perks to teachers and students through exchanges, etc., but they do come at a cost of forcing teachers to actually allow the Chinese government to dictate how teachers here in the U.S. are teaching students about the regime, which means essentially that students wouldn't be learning the truth about the country that has the worst human rights record in modern history. Now, those who were opposed to this effort said these bills aren't needed because they say this problem just doesn't exist.
The reality is that each of these bills is a solution in search of a problem and would ultimately impose unnecessary burdens on our already overstretched K-12 schools.
In recent years, there's been evidence of at least 500 schools where the Chinese Communist Party has infiltrated the classroom. That's just in the past few years. And remember, Steph, this comes as recent polling is consistently showing that Gen Zers have a more favorable opinion of socialism than they do of capitalism. So I'll just give you an example here. A recent poll by Cato YouGov in March this year found that around 60% of 18 to 29-year-old Americans have a favorable view of socialism. Of course, we remember that many states are realizing that this is an issue, and they're actually moving to try to mandate teaching about the horrors of communism in their classrooms. So Florida is the first one that went ahead and did so, and that new curriculum will start next year, Steph.
Florida has been a key player in leading the way in some of the changes in other red states, so we'll see how that all pans out as well. Thanks so much for your time this morning, Melina Weisskopf. Good to speak with you.
Shocking that our key adversary is financing our education system.
Certainly. And another shocking report, the possible funding of terror from the American heartland that's been making headlines today. The Treasury Department is investigating claims that Minnesota taxpayer dollars were stolen through fraudulent nonprofits and funneled to a terrorist group in Somalia.
NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on that report, including reactions from the White House and Governor Tim Walz.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent announced the inquiry yesterday on X. He says the department is investigating allegations that Minnesotans' tax dollars may have been diverted to the terrorist organization Al-Shabaab under what he called the feckless mismanagement of the Biden administration and Governor Tim Walz. The investigation comes amid concerns over welfare fraud in the state, especially relating to Somali communities. So far, 86 people have been charged in what prosecutors describe as a rampant and widespread fraud scheme. 78 of those charged, 91%, are Somali. The Department of Justice said a Minnesota nonprofit called Feeding Our Future and its affiliates stole more than $240 million in federal funds. It says the organization recruited people to open more than 250 nutrition program sites throughout Minnesota.
A nonprofit and its affiliates with these Somali migrants claim to have fed tens of thousands of American children during the pandemic. They were reimbursed for those meals by taxpayers. However, federal prosecutors found that almost all of those meals were never even delivered to hungry children.
The DOJ says the locations fraudulently claimed to be serving meals to thousands of children a day within just days or weeks of being formed.
In fact, those organizations' leaders spent the money on houses, luxury cars, and real estate in Turkey and Kenya.
Another scheme involved hundreds of organizations reimbursed for services which were supposed to help people at risk of homelessness.
Once again, those services were never provided.
White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt says the fraud and abuse occurred under Democrat leadership in a Democrat-run state.
Where these refugees, these migrants are coming to the United States, they are abusing our system, they are draining our resources.
Minnesota Governor Tim Walz last week said he would work with the administration to root out fraud, speaking on a local news outlet.
Do not paint an entire group of people with that same brush, demonizing them, putting them at risk when there is no proof to do that. But if you want to help us and you want to go after the criminals, and you want to make sure there's no connection or find out where the money went, we welcome that. We'll work with you on that.
Minnesota is home to the nation's largest Somali population at about 87,000. Last month, President Trump announced he was terminating temporary deportation protections for Somalis living in Minnesota, saying Somali gangs are terrorizing people in the state. The move accelerates the end of a program that began in 1991. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
And President Trump stopping by the first White House Christmas party of his second term. The
president paid tribute yesterday to two National Guard members in last week's D.C. shooting. One was killed, another is still fighting for his life.
I want to just pay my respects to the National Guard and those two incredible people. Both of them were the best everything, the best of their class, the best of their class. I just want to let you know it's an honor for me to be your president. And, you know, we have a little more than 3 years left, and 3 years for Trump is an eternity. That's a long period of time. But
Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says she recommended a full travel ban on some countries during a meeting with the president. In a post on X, Noem said the U.S. is being flooded by, in her words, foreign invaders and killers. Federal officials say the D.C. shooting suspect, Ranmullah Lakanwal, is an Afghan national who entered the U.S. through Operation Allies Welcome, a program now under renewed scrutiny.
The administration recently paused all asylum decisions and permanently paused immigration from what it calls third world countries. NTD's Washington correspondent Mari Otsu has more from the White House.
The terrorist who gunned down American soldiers blocks away from the White House in an ambush was an Afghan national who was flown into our country by Joe Biden's administration in September 2021 in the chaotic wake of their botched withdrawal from Afghanistan, one of the most embarrassing moments in the history of our great country.
The White House doubling down on President Trump's mass deportation operation after the Thanksgiving Eve shooting of two West Virginia National Guardsmen just blocks away from the White House.
Sarah and Andrew are heroes, and we will never forget their sacrifice. That means ensuring the monster responsible for this atrocity is prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law and faces the most severe punishment possible.
The White House blames what it calls former President Joe Biden's historic failure in Afghanistan and Operation Allies Welcome, which provided entry to Afghan nationals after U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021.
Nearly 100,000 Afghans were recklessly released into the United States with little to no vetting.
And vows to re-examine all Afghan entrants under Biden.
Any individual who threatens our national security or our citizenry will be subject to removal. Self-destructive immigration policies that allowed foreigners who outright hate our country and have no interest in assimilating into our culture, they've allowed these individuals to flood peaceful American communities.
This comes as President Trump announces permanently pausing migration from what he calls third world countries. And the U.S. Immigration Agency launches a re-examination of green card holders from what it calls 19 countries of concern. Citizens of the same 19 countries face a travel ban to the U.S., and all asylum decisions are currently paused. Meanwhile, President Trump's physician says that the results of his preventative October MRI are, quote, perfectly normal.
This level of detailed assessment is standard for an executive physical at President Trump's age and confirms that he remains in excellent overall health.
This comes amid media scrutiny about the president's health, some of which the White House condemns as false reporting. Reporting from the White House, Mari Otsu, NTD News.
Thanks to Mari for that report. And staying with President Trump, he will host his 9th cabinet meeting this morning. We'll keep you updated there.
But up ahead, nearly half of U.S. trucking schools may be in violation of federal rules.
What that could mean for thousands of schools across the country. Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. I'm Carrie Dunst. If you're just joining us now, here are some of today's top headlines. Nearly 72 million people are under a winter weather advisory. Alerts from the Rockies to southern New England as forecasters say a rapidly strengthening storm is forming over the eastern U.S. today. This is the third storm this week sweeping across the country. It's expected to set new low temperature records alongside snow, rain, and a chance of Gulf Coast tornadoes. The FAA says some airports could see delays. The White House defending a controversial second strike on a suspected drug smuggling boat in the Caribbean. The White House says Vice Admiral Frank Bradley ordered the follow-on strike and acted within his legal authority. But the strike is raising questions and Congress is now investigating. Bradley is set to brief lawmakers this week. And the White House says the Trump administration is feeling very optimistic about the peace process between Russia and Ukraine. White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt said Special Envoy Steve Witkoff is traveling to Russia to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. And a spokesperson for the Kremlin says the talks today will be held behind closed doors. He declined to specify what issue the two are set to discuss. And 27-year-old Luigi Mangione, the man accused of killing United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, appeared in court yesterday. His attorneys requested the hearing in an attempt to get key evidence removed from the case that they say were seized unlawfully, including a notebook and a silencer and a 3D printed handgun. Now Mangione faces both state and federal charges. The state charges carry the possibility of life in prison, while federal prosecutors are seeking the death penalty. No trial has been scheduled yet, but the next hearing date in the federal case is for January 9th. Those are this morning's top headlines. With that, Steph, over to you.
Thanks, Carrie. And the U.S. is lowering tariffs on South Korean automobiles to 15%. That's after Seoul moved to put in place major strategic investment rules. The drop will be retroactive to November 1st of this year. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick says the shift ensures U.S. workers will receive the full benefit of President Trump's trade deal with South Korea. The tariff rollback also includes removing duties on airplane parts and aligning South Korea's reciprocal rate with Japan and the European Union. Last month, South Korean officials agreed to invest $350 billion in U.S. industries like shipbuilding. The country will also purchase $100 billion in energy products. The decision comes as South Korea battles inflation, with prices rising to 2.4% in November. Now, nearly half of the nation's truck driving schools may be forced to close after a review found they may not comply with federal rules. The Department of Transportation found nearly 44% of the 16,000 truck driving programs listed nationwide may be in violation of government rules. The Transportation Department said yesterday that it plans to revoke the certification of nearly 3,000 schools unless they can comply with training requirements in the next 30 days. And another 4,500 schools are being warned they may face similar action. Auditors cited falsified training data, missing documentation, and failure to meet curriculum and facility standards among the most common violations. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy says bad actors were able to game the system and let unqualified drivers onto the road. The enforcement effort follows a deadly Florida crash caused by a driver who Duffy says should never have been given a license. Separately, the Department of Homeland Security is auditing trucking firms in California owned by immigrants to verify the status of their drivers and whether they're qualified to hold a commercial driver's license. Critics warn that legal immigrant drivers are being unfairly targeted. We will be reporting on that if that is so. Next, the Department of Transportation is threatening to withhold more than $30 million in highway funds from Minnesota over improperly issued commercial driver licenses.
Federal officials have given the state 30 days to revoke the licenses and come into compliance following a nationwide audit. A spokesperson for Minnesota Governor Tim Walz says the state is reviewing the federal letter and it insists it is already in compliance with the law. And the Transportation Security Administration said yesterday it will begin charging domestic air travelers $45 starting on February 1st if their IDs do not meet stricter federal standards. On November 20th, the TSA said in the Federal Register the fee would be $18 if travelers did not have a real ID, but they said they raised the price due to higher than forecasted expenses. The fees are non-refundable and it could take travelers up to 30 minutes to pay and to go through security if not done so before arriving at the airport. Now, the $45 fee would cover travel for a 10-day period, so in theory, you could get your typical round-trip travel covered. Travelers can also use a government-issued passport, permanent resident cards, and military IDs, among others. DHS says 94% of passengers are already compliant, and the new fee, it's intended to encourage travelers to obtain a real ID.
Coming up, President Trump signs a bill into law that would nearly quadruple pensions for Medal of Honor recipients.
And the First Lady unveils the White House Christmas decorations, calling it America's Christmas. We're going to have that and more. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. Heroes getting special recognition. President Trump yesterday signed a bill into law that would nearly quadruple pensions for Medal of Honor recipients.
Such an interesting way to honor those people who've served the country. The Medal of Honor Act was introduced in the House by Congressman Troy Niels and in the Senate by Senator Ted Cruz.
The Medal of Honor recipients are extraordinary. We see you, we remember you, we're grateful for you, and as of this afternoon, the Medals Act will be signed into law.
The act increases the pension for Medal of Honor recipients from its current rate of around $17,000 a year to about $67,000 a year. The Medal of Honor was first introduced during the Civil War. It's the single highest military honor.
It is awarded exclusively for acts of extreme bravery that rise beyond what would be reasonably expected of an individual. Today, 61 Americans are alive who have been awarded the Medal of Honor, most of them veterans of the Vietnam War. The medal is often awarded for actions that cost a service member their life.
And next, First Lady Melania Trump and Second Lady Usha Vance helped make care packages for deployed service members yesterday.
The pair attended a holiday event at Joint Base Andrews in Maryland.
JD and I are inspired every time we fly by your care and professionalism and are deeply grateful for your service. The care packages that we're assembling today are part of a proud and enduring tradition. The Red Cross began distributing these packages during World War I and has continued that work ever since.
We speak regularly of the bravery of our service members, and we should. But we must also illuminate the bravery of those who walk beside them, the spouses who carry the weight of family life on top of their own dreams.
After their remarks, Vance and Trump sat and talked to people at the event as they made Red Cross care packages. And home is where the heart is. That's the theme of First Lady Melania Trump's White House Christmas decorations this year.
Mrs. Trump is calling it America's Christmas and encourages Americans to celebrate the love we hold within ourselves and then share it with the world around us.
She unveiled a sweeping display meant to reflect generosity, patriotism, and gratitude. Blue butterflies, decorative ribbons, strands of light, and gold stars fill the halls.
In total, the display boasts 50 Christmas trees, 75 wreaths, and a 120-pound gingerbread centerpiece. That's a big gingerbread man. Now, the Christmas tour begins today.
What a beautiful display that is. And I know there are quite a few rooms with special themes. This year's no different. Very beautiful.
Yeah, nice Christmas winter wonderland theme happening at the White House.
That's it.
Well, if you have any feedback on the show, or maybe there's something you'd like to see us cover, please send us an email at goodmorning@ntd.com. We would love to hear from you.
Yes, because that's all we have time for this hour, but follow us for round-the-clock original news coverage live at ntd.com/live, or you can always catch us on our app. I'm Stephanie Cox.
Gary Dons, we'll see you soon.
Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. Trying to live an energetic and purposeful life is frequently met with challenges around every corner. For most of us, the dreaded burnout can come and drain our body, our mind, and even feel like it's draining our souls.
I know, but joining us with practical tips is Josie Carrigan. She's a coach and author of Recharged: Break Up with Burnout, Walk in Sustainable Strength. Thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you here, and what a perfectly timed book for the holiday season. And we're very excited to talk about the book, Recharged. But before we get into it, I'd just like to get a little bit more about your background. I found it so interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me today. I am an author and a pastor, and I've done philanthropic and charity work my whole life, ministry work. I grew up in Sweden, moved to the U.S. in my teenage years, and since then have done a number of different charities and things of that nature. And along the path, found myself a little bit burned out, and that's why I wrote the book.
Yeah, you've got a big mission, and it takes a lot of work to make it happen.
Yeah.
But you've put a lot out there to support others. And if you could tell us more about your work with the organization Rescue Her.
Yeah, so several years ago, this has been back a long time, I encountered in my travels and my other ministry work, human trafficking. And it was something that just really gripped my heart. I think once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. And for me, I thought, what can I do? And it feels really overwhelming because you hear the statistics and you're talking about millions and millions. But I really felt this tug, like if I could help one, and if everybody could help one. And so Rescue Her was the name that was birthed out of that, because what if we could all help one? So I started a nonprofit called Rescue Her. It's still going strong today. I've handed over the reins to another lady who leads it. She's phenomenal. And we have a crisis hotline in the Dallas area. We work with victims and advocacy for them after they come out of human trafficking. So it's been a phenomenal journey.
Wow, so inspiring, and that message is so important, especially during the holiday season. Some people are overwhelmed by how they can help, and your message of just try to help one person, and if everybody could do that. And that's a great segue into this book, Recharged, because when you're burnt out, you feel like you can hardly help yourself, let alone help others. So what did you take from all of these experiences to say, you know, this is the next project. I need to write this book, Recharged.
Yes, well, I think we all have a purpose here on the planet, and we need to fulfill it. So that means we have to figure out a way to stay sustainably strong and not just do all this stuff and then crash and burn. And I think it's very common. It happened to me, I know that for sure. And actually, the book came out of a moment where my husband went to go and drive a vehicle that had been standing for a long time, and the battery had died. And it just inspired me with this kind of parable of a battery that reminds me of our lives. And the answer to the question of getting burned out is not really to park your car and not do anything. A car was designed to drive down the road, and it actually recharges its battery while it's doing what it was created to do. And we're created to do good on the planet. I think we all have a God design in that way, and so just giving up and quitting is not the answer. So instead, I went on this journey of how can we then walk in a way that's not overwhelming and not doing too much, but doing the thing that we were intended to do. Because I think a lot of us pick up too much along the way, the things that we're obligated to do, the pain, the hurt, the trauma, the things that maybe we're good at, but we're not necessarily called to be doing.
Incredible, and that's a beautiful message. What did you learn along the way of writing this book?
Well, I learned a lot about cars because I started talking about batteries the whole time. I was like, I didn't know, but there's such a thing, for example, called a parasitic drain, where things in the car that are not meant to be on are draining that battery. And I think a lot of times that's true of our lives. It can be things like past pain, people pleasing, unforgiveness, just things that we are not taking the time to notice. And just like you have to go and diagnose a car sometimes what's wrong with it, I think it's important for people to go and get help when they find themselves in those situations where they're like, I don't know why I'm so exhausted. Maybe you need some help to figure out what that drain is that you might not even be aware of. So I think that's important. And then just having the boundaries of knowing what am I meant to be doing and not picking up all the obligations. I think especially around the holidays, that's very important. Like drive in your lane. Don't try to swerve all over the place. Stay with what you're responsible for. And sometimes just that is so vital to finding and recouping your own power.
It's such a clear message, and I think pretty much anybody could benefit. But I want to get a sense of, like, when you were writing it, was there a particular audience that you had in mind that you've observed really, you know, could benefit from the insights that you wanted to put down on paper?
Yeah, I think, no offense to the men, but I think it's particularly for women because we're carers and we really do take on, I think, even the emotional well-being of everybody around us, and we want to care for people, and sometimes we can take on too much. And so for me, even again, going back to the car, being able to use that simple analogy to help women to walk in a way that's not overwhelming. Like, for example, when you park your car at night, you turn the lights off. You don't leave them running. Like, when do you park your life and turn the lights off? Like, when do you refresh? When do you recharge? So you're not constantly giving out. So I'm hoping that that message will help women who have a purpose on the planet and need to be able to give that to the world instead of just giving up.
And what are some of the sort of practical tips that you might have for them to really get started on this process?
Yeah, for me, things like really being clear on what I am meant to carry helped. So that's number one. Like, sit down and just think about it. What am I doing that I'm not maybe meant to be doing? And just forget about what everybody else thinks and stop doing those things. Number two, finding peace and quiet, like really parking your car and turning those lights off. I think it really settles even our nervous system. For me, I'm a strong believer, and so I do prayer and I read the Bible, and if I have that every day, and then I take one day a week when I'm purposefully more still, the other 6 days goes so much better. So that's really something I think we've gotten away from, but I believe it was a way we're designed to be able to go for the long haul with strength.
Now, you're a pastor and leader in your community with your husband. You've started this nonprofit to help disadvantaged and targeted women, and now you're an author.
Yeah.
So what's next for you?
Well, I'm actually working on another book, so we'll hopefully see that in 2026. I travel and speak to women in women's conferences. I love doing that. I'm also a grandmother of 2, so they are my favorite thing on the planet. So being with them a lot is my goal in life, really.
That's so beautiful, and a really nice picture of a balanced life where you can be striving for that mission and that goal, all within this cycle of recharging.
Yeah.
And something that I think everybody needs a kind of ally to help them take that brave step into something new, such as a balanced life where you can recharge but still go for your mission. And it sounds like, you know, your book is a really beautiful way for people to carry that ally with them and learn along the way together.
Josie Carrigan, the book is Recharge. Thank you so much for dropping by our studio, and happy holidays to you and all of your people in your community and your family.
Thank you. So lovely to be with you, and happy holidays to you too.
Thank you, Josie.
Thank you.
All right, well, we do have to wrap up now, but if you have any feedback on the show, or maybe there's something you'd like to see us cover, we'd love an email from you at goodmorning@ntd.com. Send us your thoughts.
And for round-the-clock original news coverage, you can always watch us live at ntd.com/live or catch us on our app. I'm Stephanie Cox.
I'm Carrie Dunst. Have a great day.